The base is dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down here. It's May 14th. It's a Thursday. It's a tactical Thursday. We didn't really put out a request for it, but that's how these shows go sometimes. There's a lot of news and bits of information to talk about, so I was a little sidetracked by that this morning. I apologize, but we are ready to take your tactical questions, your questions about the Bundesliga, your questions about England, your questions about La Liga, all kinds of, I think, questions at this point outside of Germany, because Germany's got their roadmap to play this weekend. Spain wants to get there. They've still got some questions to get there. We'll get into some very important elements of that are unique to Spain. England still has a lot of questions, and England is still back and forth and honestly without a plan at this stage, and that's going to become a bigger issue every single day that they do not have a plan. And Major League Soccer has some plans on a couple different things, and the big one is on the youth development side, and we'll get to that as well. But John, how are you this morning?
Let's see. Since, for those that might follow the boss on social media, had to take Trooper, the boss, the dog, to get some blood work done.
You have a lot of bosses, by the way.
Yeah. I am like third or fourth in the house, and there's only 3 people here in the house. So, took Trooper to the vet yesterday, and Patty took him early in the morning, had his teeth cleaned. He had to be knocked out for it. And so he decided not to be knocked out starting at about 20 to 2 this morning. So it was a long evening for those of us here at Office HD.
Yeah, I think it was not the same reason, but about the same for me, because I don't know what has bloomed in terms of pollen, and usually it's not pollen stuff that gets me. My ears the canals want to close up and pop my ears off of my head is what
wow.
It feels like. It's not pleasant, and It's a little hard to sleep when you're a side sleeper and your ears are bothering you. It's a little hard to get comfortable. So,
yes.
Yeah, not a ton of sleep. We're rocking the Coke Energy this morning, and we'll get through it. We'll power through it. That's what we do.
Yep. Last night on national cable sports television, there was a specific Atlanta-Orlando game that was shown last night. And that was a fun watch. It's always fun to see the hashtag Bendick face after Joseph scores a goal to set a new record in Major League Soccer. And FC Waffle came in this morning, having watched said match. Post-Atlanta versus Orlando 2018 match thoughts. Tactics and defense much improved in the last 2 years. Barco and Robinson were babies. Joseph's ball skills are vastly improved in 2019-20, creating a better overall striker. So many players in the match not with us now.
Yeah, there's a lot of changeover. It's a little, I don't want to say jarring, but you had a change in manager too that goes alongside of it, and I don't think there was a lot of changes just because of that. I think more than anything, it's just when you start a club from scratch, you have a lot of guys who are on similar time frames in their contracts. So you're going to have a lot of contracts come up at the same time. You also had, things happen. After 2018, you had won a title. You had an expansion draft coming in. So Greg Garza, that trade was a big part of it. At that time, in that match, Darlington Nagbe was not back from injury yet. Eric Remedi had really taken hold in that holding midfield spot. The tactics are different. I don't want to say that they're improved because they're just different. Tata Martino had things that he prioritized in a game plan that Frank de Boer doesn't. Frank de Boer had things that he prioritizes that Tata Martino didn't. I think when you had a team that you built from scratch and you had a player like Miguel Almiron who could flip the field with 5 steps, you wanted to play it in a transition kind of way. Now, inside of that, if you think of the difference between 17 to 18, Tata Martino wanted to take a team that was very strong and maybe a little overly reliant in transition moments, specifically with Miguel, to a more balanced team and try to have more possession. There was a big jump in valuing possession from 17 to 18. That was a dramatic shift. You also saw Tata step away from the press as much. 17, you pressed a lot more. You didn't press as much in 18, but you could dial it up when you wanted to. And when you were in the 3-5-2, you didn't really press. And I'll always remember Tata talking about you can't press as effectively with a 3-5-2. When you have a 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3, whichever way you want to call it, you can have a line of 3 to press. 2 pressing is limited because you can't cover the ground. You can get wide around that front 2. You have to adjust your shape to press, and that can create problems when it breaks down. So he always talked about how he couldn't press as much out of the 3-5-2, but the 3-5-2 ended up suiting that team a little bit more. So you had differences with Tata. With Frank, possession was the number one element, not the transition, because you didn't have Miguel Almiron anymore. Pity Martinez is not that kind of player. You want him to get the ball in 1v1 opportunities, and not the 1v1 opportunities you necessarily wanted for Miguel. For Miguel, you wanted 1v1 opportunities where he could run at you. You wanted him in open space running where you're a defender and you are terrified because you can't backpedal fast enough. You're trying to make that decision on when to step up, and you know you've got Joseph running one way, and there was one break in that game that I'll always remember where Miguel overhit the pass to Barco, but Barco was running almost as fast as Miguel with the ball, and if it had been a better weighted pass, Barco's in alone. So that team, you wanted them out on the break. This team, you don't. You want Pitti 1v1 at a standing motion a lot of times with a defender in front. You want him to take people on. Barco can do both. That's why I've always loved Barco's game. He can get out in the run, but he can also beat you in a 1v1 situation off the dribble. I think Joseph, that's a really good point. And some of it is down to what he's being asked to do, but he's showing you more in the current system because he's being asked to do more. Not to say he couldn't have done it before, but he's being asked to take on a bigger role in the possession play, and he's been absolutely great at it. I've loved watching him develop that part of his game. It's interesting from a team that played in 2018 and won the title to 2019 and won 2 trophies, how different they were maybe philosophically. And a lot of that's down to Miguel. Because when you start a team from scratch, when you are Tata Martino and you get hired, and there are, let's see, Kenwin Jones, Chris McCann, Tito Villalba, you had Tambakis, you had Burgos under contract, who neither one really factored in. I think that was it when Tata was hired. So you are brought in, and by a lot of accounts, one of the first calls that Tata made was to start on Miguel and to start to try to bring Miguel in, because you're able to build a team around him from day one. It's not fitting him into an existing group. It's building the team around what he does. And Tata talked about how he thought Miguel was the best player in the Argentine league, and all kinds of things showed you how much he valued him. He built a team around him. Frank came into a different situation. Frank came in with a team that was built to play one way around one player. And as great as Joseph was in 18, that team was built around Miguel. When Miguel was gone, Frank had to come in, adapt, because he has a little bit different philosophy as well. He had to adapt to what he had. He had to adapt to the focal point of the team being gone and a new focal point coming in who was on fumes at that point. You know, Pity Martinez was exhausted physically, mentally. He was just tired, and it showed early. And you had some bumps, but you had a great run defensively in the first half of the season last year, and then you had the great run at the end. They're different. It's not one's better than the other. It's not one's more advanced than the other. It's just those are the differences you deal with, and that's why both of them are great managers. Tata Martino was able to build a team from scratch around a great player, and he picked the absolute right way to play around that player and made the tweaks that were needed to win a title. Frank came in and took a team that was built to play one way, shifted it, incorporated another focal player, dealt with a bunch of injuries, shifted the tactics, multiple times in the season, and won 2 trophies and got to a league semifinal. They're both great managers. It's not one's better than the other. It's not one's more advanced. It's just they're both asking the team to do different things.
From a broadcasting perspective, I know that it was fun for a lot of Atlanta United fans to watch that match again last night on ESPN2. From a broadcasting perspective, how special was it for you and Mike to be there for that piece of history?
Oh, it was amazing because you kind of had a feeling it was going to happen. I mean, when we were looking back and we did that re-air on 92.9 about a month ago, we talked about how maybe a month out when Joseph's going to break the record, it's just a matter of when. And you start doing the math, and it's like, okay, if he's averaging this many goals per game, he's going to score here. He could score, this many goals in this next 4 weeks. You start zeroing in on, man, he could break the record in Orlando, and that's nuts. I think what was interesting about the game was at the beginning we were really focused on the record. We were really focused on, all right, he's going to get a goal and break the record. Orlando played really well. Orlando made it difficult for Atlanta in that match. Orlando had a great goal of their own. And Joseph had missed, I think, one pretty good chance early, too. So we're like, is he pressing? Is he, is it in his head a little bit? And, man, Orlando is making this really difficult tonight. This might not be a clear-cut win. You might not be able to find that goal for him. And then that goal came out of not just the Joseph finish at the end, which was outstanding, the 1-2, the combination play to get out of trouble between Gressel and Villalba, in their own half, kind of deep in their own half, maybe on the edge of their defensive third. They find their way out of trouble. Tito plays Gressel into space. Gressel makes the right decision this time to not take it wide and look for the cross or hit the early cross, but to dribble a little more inside and to slip a pass into Joseph, which is not the typical Julian Gressel assist. Absolute right decision in this one. He read it perfectly. And then Joseph, with just a couple of touches, eliminated 3 players, eliminated the goalkeeper, made him sit down and scored a great goal. Scored an absolutely great goal.
And that was, like I said, I was able to watch the timeline last night and folks reminiscing about it. And so I figured I would ask your reminiscence as well, because it was a special night for Atlanta United, special night for Atlanta United fans. It was shown on national TV again last night.
So Kefsey was watching the game afterwards, and I watched a little bit of that too. They were doing all kinds of rivalry games on ESPN too. He said the changes in personnel were also very apparent in the 2015 New York Derby, the Hudson River Derby. That was NYC halfway through their first year. Pirlo was in the stands. He had been signed but hadn't joined the team yet. Lampard hadn't joined the team yet. There's a documentary, and I don't remember what it's called, that was a behind-the-scenes of that first NYC team. I highly recommend it because you'll have a different impression of Jason Kreis and the job he did with that team, because they were supposed to have Frank Lampard from day one. He went on that 6-month, what was reported at the time as a loan. It wasn't a loan. It was a 1-year deal with Manchester City that had an out midway through to go join New York City. Well, Manchester City didn't want to let him out. They kept him. And Kreis had kind of planned on having Lampard. It didn't have him. Then I think it's been reported pretty widely that Kreis wanted something different with the last designated player spot. They signed Pirlo, huge name, who was coming off of a good year. He did not fit, obviously, into what MLS was. He just didn't have the legs at that point, and you couldn't build the team properly around him to get what you had in him left. You couldn't play him and Lampard together in the midfield because they both needed some protection. But you had 2 high-profile players you had to play. That team was flawed, and it took time for Patrick Vieira to kind of fix things. I think Kreis got a bad rap in New York City. I still don't know what happened to him in Orlando, because I do think Jason Kreis is a good manager, but the NYC job wasn't all on him. But that was a team that had Mix Diskerud, who, I think we've all forgotten about at this point. The Red Bulls, maybe one of their best groups that still was, factoring into the 2018 record-setting year with Dax McCarty, with Sasha Klestin, with Bradley Wright Phillips. Yeah, that was a good match. And that was maybe the one where you started to really buy into Hudson River Derby as a big deal, because there was a lot of nasty tackles in it, a lot of physical play, a lot of handbags, a lot of yelling at each other, a lot of stuff like that added to it. And the one thing that cracked me up in it that I'd forgotten about, because I know I watched it live, they cut to Pirlo in the stands at one point, and the crowd starts going nuts. And who was on the call? Adrian Healy and Taylor Twellman. Healy thought that the crowd was going nuts for Pirlo, but they were showing LL Cool J on the stadium screen. So then they try to time it up again. They cut back to Pirlo in the second half, and he is maybe just having an affectionate hug and kiss with his wife. Maybe, making out. I don't know. But they cut to him, and Healy says something like, "Oh, Pirlo, loving life in New York." It was really funny because they cut to him, and they're like, "Oh, well, cut away."
To answer your question, the name of the documentary is Win with an exclamation point.
They didn't do a lot of that in that first year, but it's a really good behind the scenes. I definitely recommend it. I came out of it respecting Christ a lot more.
The IMDb entry for Win with an exclamation point has a full cast of 2 people, Claudia Reyna and David Villa, each playing themselves.
Well, yes, they did, and Jason Christ did, and his staff did, and lots of other people did too.
So IMDb's got to shape up because they only have a cast of 2 people on the Win documentary.
Disappointing, IMDb. Come on.
So, but yes, Win with an exclamation point, and I think it's on Prime Video, if I'm not mistaken. So it still exists on Prime.
Excelente.
The news of the day domestically, Stone posting the link to the article from MLSsoccer.com with the picture of the MLS Elite Youth Development Platform locations for their franchises. He says and admits it was probably already on the docket for today, but what do you think?
I got lots of thoughts on this. People have, like you would expect, and I really hope that this changes at some point. This got posted and immediately people started complaining. Look, the U.S. Soccer Federation called an end to the Development Academy. They said, we're not doing this anymore. We had Tony Annan on for a 1v1, and he said he didn't know that was coming. There had been conversations, there had been talk. We've talked to Tony about this on the network before. They were really struggling with the Atlanta Academy about the level of competition. And he talked about how he would play, a younger team in an age group in DA because he wanted to push them more, and he had to push guys up in age group because they weren't getting the level of competition that they needed, not on a consistent basis. So there's been issues for a while, and I think the DA would have went away at some point, maybe after this season, maybe after next season, who knows. It had served its purpose. Well, when it did, you didn't have a plan in place. When we talked to Tony a couple weeks ago, they did not have things nailed down yet about what it was going to look like. And if you check out some of the things that were said about this, both in the MLS media conference call that came out yesterday and Paul Kennedy's piece over at Soccer America, they're still working through what it's going to look like. One big thing you're working through is what games look like right now because of coronavirus. When are you going to be able to play? Are you going to limit travel in the early stages? What is it going to be? And there's no way to know that right now. So this, in some ways, gives you more time to sort through and figure it out. They're trying to make it a collaborative thing. MLS doesn't have to do any of that. And this is where I'm kind of baffled by the let's complain about MLS again today. MLS is in business for MLS. They are not a operating arm of the United States Soccer Federation, no matter what tinfoil hat you want to put on today. They are not a development tool for U.S. national teams. They are in business for Major League Soccer, and clubs are in business for themselves. They are, and they're all part of a single entity, and it's all about MLS. They are creating a youth competition that is including other clubs when they don't have to. That's the key here, and to talk about it, and Sam Stejskal has it in his follow-up on this, and Sam's got some great information over at The Athletic on it as well. Multiple sources said that it's likely that MLS academies will primarily play other MLS academies, and non-MLS clubs will primarily play against each other in their own circuit. There will be some crossover between the divisions and regular season and cup competition for the U15 and U17 groups. Those are the two that are mandated that MLS teams have to field. Said, this is Stejskal. He said, but it will be somewhat minimal, with one source pegging it at a maximum of 15 to 20% of the total number of games. So let's get this straight. Major League Soccer is creating a youth competition that overwhelmingly will be MLS teams playing MLS teams, but they are creating a structure for a competition to include other clubs. That's a good thing that they don't have to do, especially now when you're talking about the financial implications of everything. They don't have to do that. They are. They're putting their time and effort towards this. That's a good thing for the game. That's a good thing. What else have I seen? People complaining about the map, the footprint. Mm-hmm. That's not on MLS. MLS doesn't have a team in Alabama or Mississippi. You know, there's not academies in those states because MLS chose not to accept clubs from those states, and I don't know what the process was, but clubs from those states haven't been at the same level. And there's no MLS club there, so there's no obligation to have an MLS team in the academy. We have to understand this. And this is what, you know, I've pushed back on a little bit when U.S. Soccer said that the DA was an overwhelming success. It was for the clubs in the DA, and most of those clubs, with the exception of MLS academies and some USL academies, were already successful. You know, Concord Fire coming in, for example, was already a successful club. They came into the DA. It didn't change Concord Fire in terms of elevating them. There are a few clubs, very, very small number, that might have been elevated by the DA. Maybe they were in different places, didn't have as much access to top competition. But in general, the DA shined a spotlight on clubs that already had some light on them and didn't grow anything else. My hope is that by MLS focusing on this, U.S. Soccer now, and we said this when the DA went away, they need to put an overwhelming emphasis on coaching education and development in those states that don't have teams in this competition or don't have many teams at ECNL and need more support. That's where they need to put their focus on. And we're all learning how to do things remotely these days. You can do a lot of that remotely to help do it, but you have to be intentional about it. You can't just say, we have a coaching course online. Do it, please. It'd be nice if you signed up. You've got to do the outreach. You've got to really work to grow it because there's nothing in the water in Montgomery, Alabama that is different than Atlanta, Georgia in terms of creating a young soccer player who is talented and can have a future in the game. There's nothing. There's some cultural differences because in Atlanta, kids now have Joseph Martinez and Pity Martinez and Ezequiel Barco and Miles Robinson to look up to. You don't have that directly in Montgomery. So you've got to create a culture. But there's no reason why a top player can't be developed in Montgomery, can't be developed in Jackson, Mississippi, can't be developed in Bismarck, North Dakota. Bismarck is North Dakota, by the way, right? It's not South Dakota.
Yes, that's Pierre. Yes, Pierre and Brookings, right. Yes.
Got
yes.
it right. There's no reason. Like, there's some cultural things, there's access, there's stuff like that. But if those players have access to top-level coaching, U.S. Soccer can help develop that coaching. You can improve the level. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. That's a key. But that's where U.S. Soccer can focus on now. And that's where they need to focus. Because the lack of clubs in this competition that MLS is doing, where they're inviting clubs from outside of MLS to be part of it, the lack of clubs in Alabama and Mississippi, and I'm picking those two because they're right next to us, that's not on MLS. That has nothing to do with MLS. That is on U.S. Soccer as a whole, and potentially some on the state associations, and they need to work together to grow the game in those areas. That's what it is. So I think this is a setup that I appreciate that MLS is doing this for clubs that they don't have to. A few new faces in that mix as well. I like that clubs have a choice in where they want to go. And yeah, they have to get accepted by the league. I mean, ECNL's not taking everybody that signs up. This competition didn't take everybody that probably sent in an ask. Most competitions don't do that. I don't think there is, one that's just completely open. So clubs have a choice to pick what makes the most sense for them. That's good. That's a good thing, because what's good for Concord Fire might not be the same for the Atlanta United Academy. What's good for, Southern Soccer Academy, who's in this, might be different than what's good for AFC Lightning. They're different clubs. Decatur YMCA, different club. And now they can find what works best for them. And it's a little decentralized, because when it's coming from the federation, then it looks like, okay, pyramid, you're here or you're here or you're here at the top. And if you're in the top, you're in the DA. Now, you pick what makes the most sense for you, because honestly, at the youth level, the important elements are the training. The important elements are putting what you learn in training to practice in matches. It's not about winning leagues. It's not about winning trophies. It's about developing players and people. And clubs can do that no matter if they're in the ECNL, if they're in the SCCL, if they're in the Region 3 Premier League, if they're in the MLS Academy system, whatever they're in, they can do that. This is a necessary step for the MLS teams, because they can create the competition that they need for their professional academies, which there's only a handful of in this country. It's a little hard for a professional academy to be in the same conversation in terms of how they want a competition to look, what kind of rules they want, versus a club that is developing players for college or just developing players to play in tournaments and win tournaments. Those are two different aims. Atlanta United, it's great when they win a tournament, but they don't care about winning a tournament. They care about George Campbell going from the academy to Atlanta United 2 to the first team and making an MLS debut. For a Concord Fire, and I keep mentioning them because they're one of the oldest and they're one of the strongest in the metro area. For a Concord Fire, you don't have that senior team like that. You don't have you don't have those steps. You develop a player to go to college or go join a professional club. You're not developing them for your own club. It's a different process. It's a different mindset. So this is what was needed. It's what was needed before the DA went away, but after the DA went away, I really appreciate that MLS created a structure that does include non-MLS clubs when they didn't have to.
Follow-up. 3 of the 95 teams, and this goes into Bartimus Prime's question or statement, 3 of the clubs that are currently in the 95 are USL clubs: Phoenix, currently Sacramento, and St. Louis FC.
Yep.
I would think, and this is my own perception before I get into what Bart says, I would think that those geographic gaps that are not addressed by the MLS Youth Academy would be aided by the USL Academy and where their franchises are to create those opportunities. True?
Yeah, but USL started their own academy league.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
But they're doing their own thing. Gaps are... You can't look at gaps in terms of, MLS has a gap. You have to look at, honestly, you have to look at what the MLS Academy structure is going to be, the USL Academy structure, the ECNL, the other regional leagues that are out there. Then you'll see where gaps truly are. You know, is the level, and this is the more important. When I'm talking gaps, I'm talking level.
Yeah.
The level in Alabama and Mississippi clubs is not the same as it is in Georgia clubs. It's not the same as it is in Texas clubs when you're talking about this region. It just isn't. And it needs to grow. There has to be resources put there and an emphasis put there to grow it. If U.S. Soccer's emphasis was on the top clubs in the DA, well, they had no real interest in spreading themselves even more thin to go really put forward a program in Alabama to raise the level of youth soccer. There was nothing in it for U.S. Soccer at that point because they didn't have the resources. Well, now they're not running a league. Now you're going to be able to go get players out of the MLS Academy for your youth national teams. You're going to be able to look at the USL Academies. You're going to be able to look at ECNL. You've got 3 different groups covering more ground than you did in your DA. You're going to go to competitions and you're going to scout, but a lot of these are going to be available too. You're not going to have to go out and bird dog it. It's not going to be the old days of beating down the bushes to go find a player. You're going to have a lot of this brought to you. Okay, cool. Now what do you do with your resources? Now you can go and take that next step and go identify young, talented coaches in Alabama and Mississippi who can change the game in those states. That's what is needed from U.S. Soccer now. So it's not just the MLS map. It's not just the USL map. It's not just the ECNL map. It's all of them. U.S. Soccer needs to look at where the gaps are when you overlay all 3 and then say, okay, we see where there's not as many clubs. We also see where what we know level is. There's places where it's higher and there's places where it's lower. Where can we go and have impact? And that's what the federation has to do going forward. MLS needs to run this competition, and MLS needs to focus on developing players for MLS. USL, focusing on developing players for USL. ECNL and other youth leagues are focusing on creating the best competition for their members. Those are 2 different things, and they're going to have different focuses, and that's okay, because what it does is it widens the net for talented players in this country. ECNL, if you are in an area where the high school game is important and you can go play in it, you might choose to play for an ECNL club because you might have a great coach who is developing you as a player, developing you as a person, but you're also getting that opportunity to play in a high school game in front of 1,000 or 2,000 people and dealing with a pressure that you don't deal with at the youth game. You know, you don't deal with on a Saturday afternoon, playing in a park with parents sitting around the field. It's a different pressure. High school can have a place for some players in some areas. Others, it's a detriment, and you have to deal with that. For a professional, a striving professional player who's a 16-year-old in an MLS academy and is this close to getting minutes in USL, no, they don't need to go play high school. That's different. They're going to go get those minutes, those competitive minutes in USL matches. That's a whole nother category. So there's no blueprint across the board that's going to solve all of it because it's all so different state to state, location to location, even within the state. I mean, Atlanta is very different than the rest of the state in terms of soccer level. Statesboro is in Tormenta trying to elevate the southern part of the state. You've had good clubs out of Columbus. You've had good clubs out of Macon, out of Athens, out of Rome, out of Dalton, out of Gainesville now with the Lanier Soccer Academy. You've got others happening, but you also have a lot of, if you're looking at a map, gaps, where you don't have as much strong soccer playing. We've talked about a player on the girls' side at Vidalia, Maddie Owen, who scored 90 goals in high school last year. There's no club for her to play at that is the appropriate level to take a player that has that kind of potential and make them a future national team player. There's not a club near her to do that. So if she's going to make it, she's got to go to Savannah, to Valdosta and Valdosta's not at that level, to Jacksonville, and those are not necessarily at the same level. It's harder depending on where you're at, and where U.S. Soccer can have a huge impact is where they can help whatever the local youth soccer organization in Vidalia is, have access to the best coaching education they can have. They can't go out and make a great coach out of thin air. I mean, you've seen it in all sports where some people are natural coaches, some people are not. Some people can communicate with young athletes in the best way possible, and they learn how to get better as a coach as they go. Others might want to do it, but they just don't click as a coach at that level. U.S. Soccer can't control that part, but what they can do is for the people who are motivated and the people who want the education, they can get the education to them. And that's where they need to focus. They need to focus those elements to bridge some of those gaps. I don't want to see a player like Maddie Owen be in a GHSA record book and then we don't hear of her again. I want her to have the opportunity to go on and play in college. I want her to have the opportunity to play in the NWSL and maybe make a national team. She's a sophomore. She scored 90 goals. But where she's at, she does not have access to top coaching. If she was in Atlanta, it's a different conversation. And that's what U.S. Soccer as a whole can try to work towards. So those gaps are both location, but also level. And they can be two different things. And the Federation really needs to put an emphasis there. And if they don't, MLS is already showing that they're going to go beyond just what they have to do and create an academy structure for their academy clubs. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's sitting down with somebody like Peter Vermes, who has done really good work and I think has been very thoughtful about the game and the way he sees it and the way he sees development. Maybe it's saying, Peter, we're going to get a sponsor behind this and we're going to pay you to create build a top soccer club in a box model. And we want to be able to give this to anybody who wants it. If we get a call from a director in, rural Arkansas or, in Oakland or in, Chicago or in Springfield, we want to be able to give them this and say, here, this is for you. No charge, no nothing. We're going to get Peter paid to make it, but we're going to give this to anybody who wants it to grow the game and to grow that level. Maybe that's something MLS can look to do. Maybe it's something the Federation needs to do. Maybe it's something USL teams can do on a regional basis. But these are the things that take it to the next level. These competition structures are important, but they can't solve everything.
I guess my overarching point was that just because you don't see a dot close to you in the MLS development platform doesn't mean there isn't something going on, for 7 negatives in a sentence.
Sure, but it also doesn't mean that what's going on is at the same level, and we have to understand that. MLS clubs were struggling with the DA structure because they weren't getting enough competitive games. That's why you saw a lot of Atlanta United Academy teams going to Colombia, going to play in tournaments with international teams, finding those opportunities because they weren't getting enough competition. So a dot on a map doesn't necessarily answer the question. And that's the part that has to be understood as well. There's youth soccer clubs all over, but not all of them have the same level of knowledge. Not all of them have the same resources. Not all of them have the same education. Those are some areas that we need to work to close those gaps. And I think what the Houston Dynamo are doing is really strong with Tom Byer, a soccer at home kind of idea, and giving lessons to parents with young children to get those very basic foundational things, make it fun, but also while you're making it fun, teach how to roll the ball with the sole of your foot, with either foot, things like that, making games out of it. Doing those kinds of things will raise the baseline level, and we need more of that, whether it's coming from MLS, whether it's coming from USL, whether it's coming from the Federation, state associations, what have you. We need more of that. It can't just be the same areas, the same clubs with the professionals included now. It can't just be that for this country to realize its full potential as a soccer country. Got to have that grassroots growth.
And here was what Bartimus Prime had put into the queue this morning. He says he's not happy about the narrow-minded choices of the new MLS Academy League, but he's hopeful that the USL Academy will help fill some of those voids.
I don't think it's narrow-minded because you got to remember the timeline. USSF eliminated the DA and caught everybody by surprise. You had an existing ECNL that some of the clubs that maybe Bart was looking at that he thinks should be in the MLS Academy already joined the ECNL, or made a different decision to join somewhere else. You've got choice now, which is a good thing, because not every club that was in the DA was a fit for the DA. Not every club could meet the standards that the DA had. The DA set high standards. The DA raised the level of youth development in this soccer country. It did. It standardized it to a degree. Not everybody meets that. We've seen that with USL over the years, just on the professional level. We definitely saw it with the North American Soccer League, where they set a high standard for a Division II Pro League. And they ended up with very few teams that could meet that. MLS has a high price to get in at the professional level. Well, one reason they do is that eliminates some of the clubs that don't have those high standards. They can't meet the level that it needs to be met. Same on the academy side. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, and I don't think MLS could create that. MLS could have, and some might argue should have, but they easily could have said, like, we're creating, competition for our clubs. We'll play other clubs, on a case-by-case basis, but we're creating an academy league for U15 and U17, and that's what we're going to do, because that's what we do. They didn't have to invite anybody, because there's nothing necessarily in it for them. If these clubs who are outside of the MLS Academy have a great player, I guess MLS Academy teams will see them and could try to bring them in, but they could also go see what's going on in ECNL. They could go see anything going on anywhere. That's nothing new. And you're not playing them a ton. So you're not even creating like this, holistic league. You're basically creating a structure that is going to benefit outside organizations just to do it, to do something good. So if clubs want to join it and meet the level that they're being asked to meet, cool. If they want to do ECNL instead, cool, because ECNL is a great organization. If they want to do, I'm sure USL Academy would probably be willing to listen to people that would be interested in them, especially in, like we mentioned, Montgomery, Alabama. Well, Birmingham, if they do an academy that joins the Academy League, well, maybe they need some other teams to play in the area. Maybe Huntsville comes in. Maybe a Montgomery comes in. Maybe another club in the Birmingham area comes in. Okay. Now, you just figure it out. I don't think it was on MLS to solve this problem. MLS has got to solve the youth development problem for its own academies, not for everybody else. The fact that they included them, I think, is a good thing.
Stizzle says, I, for one, like the release of the footprint map. As I've complained about before, the Great Lakes states are usually overlooked in the pro soccer world. With several new MLS youth clubs, we have a better chance to catch up with the rest of the U.S., and then he uses the hashtag soccer up here with a question mark.
Yeah, the thing that's always been the case, if you go back through the history of youth national teams and youth national team pools, you're going to see the overwhelming majority of players come from California, come from New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Florida. That's the one. Texas has been growing. Those are the main ones. I'd be really curious to go back and total this up, and I might go do this because there's nothing else to do these days. I had this argument with somebody when the DA started, and they were trying to make the case, because U.S. Soccer was making the case that they were doing all of this additional outreach, and they were finding players that they had never found before, and they had access to see players they had never seen before. It just wasn't the case. The best clubs at the time were already known by U.S. Soccer because they'd been calling in those players to youth national teams for years. New clubs that were new and at that level were recognized pretty quick, and it didn't grow the game. It helped scout players within the structure, and that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. But it didn't grow the game. Now, MLS academies are going to grow the game because they're new. USL academies are going to grow the game because they're new. They're also going to bring a different mentality because they're both looking to develop professional players, which has never been the goal for youth clubs outside of the professional sphere, with maybe one or two exceptions in every part of the country. It's all about been developing college players. Different game. Completely different game. The college game is more physical. It's less technical. It's more about size and strength. So what happens? A lot of youth clubs go and do a couple things. They go and they see who's fast. They go and they see who's strong. They also go and they see who is at the end of the age group. Or who is at the early part of the age group, sorry, because they'll be older than the kids at the end of the age group. If you're almost a year older, what are the odds you're going to be bigger, you're going to be stronger, you're going to be faster, you're going to be those things quicker than the smaller kid who is at the younger end of the age group? The pro game doesn't care about that because they're not developing players for the college game that is based on size and speed and strength. They're developing players for the pro game. You see smaller players. You see technical players. You see more creative players that maybe weren't valued before. So you're getting all these new influences in the game, which is good. MLS clubs in all different parts of the country, it's good. USL clubs starting academies is a great thing because that is putting down roots that USL clubs never could really do before. So that's a great step. They're also filling in some of those gaps on the map, which is good. All of it needs time to continue to develop, where states and the National Federation can also help fill in the gap is look outside of that. There was something that, as I've been going back and doing research on World Cup bids and the national team, especially around 1990, because it was so tied up to the bid, there was this idea at that time, and this was when you were 4 or 5 years away from the NASL collapsing. You had semi-pro at best going on with the ASL and WSA at the time. About 20 teams with budgets of like $100,000 a year on the player side. I mean, nobody was making money to live on. But the idea of starting a nationwide professional league with the World Cup coming, the first step, it's a really interesting one that Werner Fricker had, the president of the federation at the time. Fricker wanted to do basically regional national teams and have them play a series of games that would then lead to developing into professional clubs. Like these players would be part of the team that represented that region and then grow it out from there. At the youth level, we don't see much of that. We see that with ODP, where you have the region. So you have a state process, then they go to a region camp, then you pick a region team. Okay, that's not the top players now. Let's take everybody outside of professional teams right now, because you know who those players are. You don't have to worry about getting them extra competition. I'd love to see U.S. Soccer create a region by region camp. You've got 4 regions of youth of soccer in the United States. You've got regions 1, 2, 3, and 4, different parts of the country. You could even divide those up and do each region have a couple regions. That'd be a whole nother process and probably need more money to do it. But the federation, they already know who the pro players are. They don't have to go scout them as easily because they're going to get tape. They're going to be able to talk to people. Fine. Go out and do a Region 3, which is all the way from Texas, over here to Georgia. It's a big region. Do a Region 3 U15 team and set up a competition with the Region 1, 2, and 3, bring them to a central location, and play a round-robin tournament with 4 regional national teams at U15. I'd do the same at U17 for players outside of the professional academies. It would be a way to see more of it. And it'd be a way to maybe not miss some of those areas that for whatever reason, whether it's history, whether it's just you're stuck in the old way of looking at certain clubs, you find those diamonds in the rough that way. It doesn't solve everything, but it would help cast a light on a larger pool. And again, now that the Federation's not putting that money into the DA, can they put some resources towards something like this to supplement the pool at U15, U17, maybe even U19?
Looking at the USLA team rosters, Eastern squads include Lou City, Pittsburgh, South Georgia Tormenta. They have Charlotte, Colorado Pride Switchbacks, which is Colorado Springs, North Carolina FC, Tampa Bay Rowdies. Boston is there as well. When you look at the Western Conference teams, you're looking at a couple of more than the 9 or 10 that were in the Eastern side. You've got Austin, you've got 2 in California, Phoenix, Rio Grande Valley, St. Louis, San Antonio, Santa Cruz and Ventura County, Union Omaha is a part of that, Tulsa, San Francisco, OKC, and El Paso. So those, if you're looking at the MLS map and you're looking at the USL Academy map, there are places where USL teams are into their footprints where MLS is into theirs as well.
Yeah, it's where, I mean, the MLS side, again, the MLS teams are where they have professional teams.
Mm-hmm.
USL is where they have professional teams.
Yep.
The professional teams are driving those locations. What MLS did on top of that was they invited others. So it's not a thing about, well, because the MLS Academy hasn't started yet. The USL Academy hasn't started yet. ECNL is going to be very different than it used to be. I don't care which one's the best because, honestly, it doesn't matter. They're looking for different things. Let them all do what they do, and you're going to have more doing things at a top level than you've ever had before. This is a good thing. I like that it's decentralized. I like that the MLS Academy teams and the clubs they invited, I like that they're all of the same mindset now. And Todd Durbin talked about this with Paul Kennedy at Soccer America. They're going to be very collaborative about this. Durbin is the Executive Vice President of Competition and Player Relations for MLS. Since April 15th, he's been trying to get this off the ground. I'm sure, again, it was probably in the back of their mind. They were not prepared for this happening. And they made an announcement that they were going to do something. Tony Annan said that caught him by surprise because it all happened so fast. So since then, April 15th, not even a month, Todd Durbin has been on Zoom calls and whatever other calls with talking to all these different clubs that were gone from the academy, that the DA, and we're trying to figure out what they were going to do. And this is what Durbin said. One was the need to provide a level of specificity so that teams that wanted to join us knew and understood what it was they were joining. What age groups, how many games, all of that. But what came to the surface almost immediately was a deep desire on behalf of everybody to make this culturally different than what had been in the past. And by that, I mean that people wanted not to be told what the platform is. They really wanted to participate and help build it and collaborate with it. There's a tremendous amount of expertise and innovative thought across everybody. Durbin said that the MLS and the non-MLS clubs that are part of this, they realized that, hey, they're kind of the same mindset. He said they were aligned on more issues than they weren't, even the controversial ones, and needed to continue the collaboration that brought them together in the first place. They're going to change some of the rules that were in the DA. They're going to do some different things. Now, when one element that Tony has mentioned a lot when we've talked about Atlanta's academy is that outside competition element. The DA had some restrictions on that, and that was one of the things that MLS teams kind of chafed at. They wanted more ability to play international opponents, different competition. Durbin said, no, that's not us. If what's best for players in their development is having them play locally, they're playing locally, especially now. We're not going to be limited by the very constraints that we create. So the government may create that constraint, talking about travel and those sorts of things. But if we find that the reason why we can't do things that are best for player development are because of constraints that are self-inflicted, We're not going to allow that to happen. I like that this is coming at it from a different approach. They want to change the culture around youth development in this sphere. And you have the professional clubs that, again, have specific aims. And you have other clubs that share those aims and are doing that, on their own. Here in Georgia, it's the Southern Soccer Academy and Lanier Soccer Academy. Other clubs, elite clubs in Georgia, have created their own competition. Some have joined ECNL. There's going to be places to play. I think the idea that, the DA shut down and clubs aren't going to have anybody to play, no, stop. There will always be a new acronym that will start up in youth soccer. There will always be something new. These clubs can figure this out. And you've got a lot of different people figuring it out now. That's better. That's better for the game, because if you're SSA, Southern Soccer Academy, you created a WPSL team that would have started its first season this year. You have a USL League 2 team that would have played its first season this year. So you're thinking differently than a club that isn't going into those areas. Okay, maybe this is a better fit for you. Lanier Soccer Academy, we've talked to Jonathan Cueva as a 1v1 on our network. I recommend you go back in the archives and pull that one up. They do a lot with futsal. They've done a lot with Atlanta United in terms of development and identifying players in Lanier and the Gainesville area. They might have a different approach. They might have a different mentality than others. Okay, this is a better fit for them. Others, ECNL might be a better fit. Others, maybe doing their own thing and creating their own competition might be the better fit. This is all good. There's nothing bad about this. Decentralizing this is the best thing possible in a country of this size with all the different challenges, all the different approaches. Take advantage of that. Find your fit.
And in the MLS model, there are 5 that are tied to the MLS franchises, and then doing math quickly, and this is in the southeastern footprint, it looks like there are 11 other franchises that are not tied to MLS. So you have 16 here in what would be the southeastern part of the United States.
Yeah, a couple other things on the nuts and bolts before we move on. So the new league, and this is according to Sam Stejskal at The Athletic, U13, 14, 15, 17, and 19 age groups. MLS teams are required to field U15, U17, up to the clubs if they want to do the others. They're considering a U16, no current plans for year 1, and everything for year 1 is up in the air right now. Mentioned the crossover, not a ton. The MLS teams will primarily play MLS teams. The governing body of this is going to be created. It's a collaborative effort between representatives from MLS on this governing body, probably a board of directors of some sort, a number of the non-MLS clubs, the potential for additional representation from NCAA coaches, it's very interesting, the Federation, and the Canadian Soccer Association. Okay. The USL teams will also participate in their USL Academy League. So they're not having to pick one or the other. If they can do both, they do both. And as we said, it's all about that competition level on the MLS side. That's what they wanted. Now they've got other people who are of the same mindset who can come along and grow another area of the youth game in maybe a different way than it's been grown before. I would assume USL and their academy will be similar in approach, but maybe a little different because you're talking about different types of clubs, different budgets, different mentalities. ECNL and other national youth organizations, they're going to do things differently too. And they're probably going to do things that suit their members. That's the important thing here is the more options you have, the more places a club can find that suits them. Because every youth club is different. Some have a big budget, some have a small budget. Some have a huge complex of their own, some don't. Some do a lot of outreach, some really don't do much outreach. Some are suburban, some are urban, some are rural. I mean, it's all different. So to say that everything has to be the same way, it's not realistic in this country. It's not realistic in this state, let alone in the whole country. So you have different places now. It's good. It's a good thing. I like it. And I like that MLS included others in it. That's something that I didn't expect. And I'm really happy that they did, because people who are of that mindset in terms of developing players in the way that MLS academies want to now have a place to go. And clubs that want to do it in a different way have a place to go. These are good things.
Before we get into hour number 2, do you wish to have me discuss the proud sponsor of the network and the program?
I always like it when you discuss our good friend, Steve Apolinsky.
Apolinsky and Associates, LLC. Recognized as legal elite by Georgia Trend Magazine for being one of the top 100 attorneys in the state. Over 30 years of experience, over $40 million in judgments for their clients in Georgia and Alabama. Wrongful death and serious injury lawsuits are their specialty. How do you get in touch with them? Here's how. Go to aa-legal.com on the website. The millisecond, the absolute millisecond that you pop up aa-legal.com, low right-hand corner, chat window. If you want to get talking immediately, you can do that 24/7, 365. You can also reach out to Steve at steve@aa-legal.com or give him a call at 404-377-9191. Steve Apolinsky and Associates, once again, proud sponsor of everything and anything SDH and the SDH networks. Go to aa-legal.com for all of your wrongful death and serious injury needs. Steve Apolinsky, Apolinsky and Associates, LLC, proud sponsors of this here network and this here show.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for always helping us out and growing what we're trying to do here. Hopefully we can help you out as well and send people your way when they need to have discussions with you like they can on the live chat function that you really like on that website.
I didn't know that. Well, I didn't know it existed. You're thinking, okay, how do I get in touch with the guy? You email and then phone number pop up. You can get a free consultation, by the way, by checking in with them. But yeah, low right-hand corner, bam, chat window. I'm not a chat guy. I'm more of a phone guy myself or an email guy. But yeah, boom, chat window popped up. You're like, oh, that's new. And that's it's an instantaneous way to get in touch with prospective clients and folks who want to get the free consultation, have concerns about their case.
If you hear this, you forget the website address, you can also get to it from soccerdownhere.net from our website. You'll see Steve on the sidebar. He can take care of you there. When MLS is back, we will have the MLS Soccer Down Here Fantasy League back, and Jason Wright of the Jason Wright Agency will be able to help you out with that. He is our commissioner. He is our fantasy guru. He has good advice for you every week about what you should do with your team, and he also can help you with your insurance needs. Jason can help you with your home insurance, your car insurance, your business insurance. Go follow him on Twitter, Jason Wright, AGEN, and the Jason Wright Agency on Facebook. You got MLS fantasy questions, or you've got insurance questions. He can help you either way.
Jason Wright and our friends at Country Financial. How are the masks going with our friends from Die Hard?
We still have a few that have not been claimed yet. Actually, not too many. So if you want to get one and donate one to the kids and families at Soccer in the Streets, they are $20 a piece. They are on order with Die Hard. They are being produced as we speak. And as soon as we get them, they will be going out to you, and then we will be making a drop-off to the office over at Soccer in the Streets. Contactless drop-off, of course.
Yes.
Masks will be worn during that. It will all be good for those kids who, might not have access to get a mask, might not know where to go to get a mask. Their parents might not know where to go. We're going to get one to kids who have been doing a good job in the Soccer in the Streets program. So $20. You can pay via PayPal. Send us a message. We'll get you taken care of. Send us a message on Twitter, on Facebook, email soccerdownhere@gmail. Whatever you want to do. We don't have a chat function on our website. Maybe we need one. John can man that 24/7.
Right. I'll get right on that.
He'd break it in 5 minutes. But
right.
We still got a few left for sale. Not very many at all. You guys have snatched them up pretty quick. Thank you.
Also, we want to say hello to those of you who access us however you do so. If it's live this way, if it's live on our Twitch, twitch.tv/soccerdownhere, your favorite podcatcher, the Soccer Down Here app, available iOS and Android, and also at the website, soccerdownhere.net, for the live look-in that way. And also, the newest addition to the SDH viewing platforms, it's our friends at Zingo TV. Download the Zingo TV app, and you can go to Channel 250 and check us out on the Barn Burner TV network starting at 11 o'clock Eastern Time. So if you miss us now, and want to listen to us later, or if you want to listen to us and watch us all over again at 11 o'clock, download the Zingo TV app, Zingo TV Channel 250, the Barn Burner Network, and we are there 11 o'clock Eastern until we're done.
We're everywhere these days. It's crazy.
Boom. All right, so now that we are in hour number 2, I guess this is the soccer over there section, unless there's something else domestic that we missed.
The BBC News Service.
Roar!
Oh, not now.
Now, there's lots of stuff now from England. We've got to catch up because they've been busy. I should start with a BBC one if I have one, and man, I got everything but the BBC. I apologize to the BBC News Service. Let's start with Miguel Delaney of The Independent. The date for Project Restart, probably back at least another week, June 19th. Delaney described it as an intense day of discussion with club captains and coaching staff that has seen the players demand more reassurances in order to go back. Premier League on Thursday, continuing talks with the FA, the EFL, the Football League, that's the Championship, League 1, League 2, and the government in order to smooth out some of the issues. Another, quote, crunch meeting on Monday where Project Restart could actually be voted on. So you don't have a plan yet. I don't know what they've been doing. They don't have a plan yet. On Thursday, that's today, they were set to go through the first coronavirus tests as part of Project Restart. Not happening. The return to training was supposed to be on Tuesday after you did the testing. Not happening. Virtually all captains do want to play. This is still just phase 1 of the 3-step plan that is still very loose. The captains want more details on the next step, which is the group training. A 2-hour video conference involved managers, Premier League medical officer Mark Gillett, and government medical expert Dr. Jonathan Van Tam. Players' primary concerns are contact on training, risk to family members, and players with conditions like asthma. So The Guardian also talked about this meetings, that it's been an evolving process. And from Paul McInnes and David Heitmer, this is something we talked about yesterday in a big way. So in this meeting with the captains, players had not previously had a chance to share their views on restart plans. Those are the guys that are going to be on the field, last time I checked.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably need to get their views when you're creating the plan.
Absolutely pathetic.
Yeah.
It's going to slow everything down. Because now you had your officials, you had all of the doctors and medical folks that basically had to, listen to the players, tell them all the things that they were concerned about. You could have done that already and created the plan around some of that. Well, no, you haven't. So safety, obviously, players have been concerned about giving their consent to abide by the protocol, the return to play protocol, which we talked about, has been a little confused. Players are concerned that if they agree to the protocol, that would leave them legally exposed if they caught the virus. It looks like that's been handled, finally. That's what's frustrating. That's an easy thing to fix. That's a conversation. That is, no, we're asking you to sign off on doing the protocol. It has nothing to do with if you contract it. It has nothing to do with that. It's just asking you to understand that when you arrive, you have a mask on. You park where you're told to. You have gloves on. You're going to get your temperature checked. You're going to fill out the questionnaire. All those kinds of things. It's something like that. So they wasted time on something like that could have been handled a long time ago. The manager's side, they've had issues too. They want more time training to get fully match fit. They also had questions about what should be done in the event a player tests positive. The league is still yet to agree upon a position over whether the entire squad should isolate. That's kind of a big element of this. What has the league been doing for the last 2 months? They've watched Germany create a plan. Spain has a plan. Italy has a plan. MLS has a plan. Other countries have plans. Ireland had. We talked about the League of Ireland plan. Why don't you have a plan? Because you don't have the governmental approvals now, so you got to push everything back. You still need to do the first round of player testing. You got to push everything back. You're running out of time, even though UEFA has loosened things up a little bit. They've offered some flexibility, according to Dale Johnson of ESPN FC, about that May 25th date, where they've asked for leagues to submit a plan to finish the season or the alternate format. They're going to allow flexibility. They said they would like leagues to provide as much as possible by May 25th, but they understand that detailed plans might not be fully available by then due to a variety of external constraints. They nevertheless expect to at least receive some indications as to the potential way forward by May 25th. They've also said they want leagues to be completed by August 2nd. That might have to move because you start to do the math on the Premier League. That's where it gets hard. The later this goes, by having needless delays because you didn't do your work on time, the group project didn't get done in time. So now you're not going to get graded in time. That means you're going to be late starting your next class. Your next class is actually playing games. Well, you got a deadline, August 2nd. If you don't start until June 19th, that's squeezing 9 games into about 5-6 weeks.
Yeah.
That's pushing it. If you have to go back another week, I don't know if you can get it done because you still have FA Cup semifinals, FA Cup final. You still have teams playing in Europe, which you've got to figure out, and they've got to figure out. That's why they want these plans. I don't know if you can get all that done now with already going back a week. It was going to be tough to do it if you started on the 12th. Now, you might not start until after Germany finishes, for example. This is why you got to be prepared. This is why when plans would come up and people would get really bent out of shape, like, oh, they're being insensitive and they're rushing back to action. But this is why you create the plans. So when you can actually see the light and start to get ready to get back, you're ready to go. You're not at this point where it's, yeah, you're supposed to have the first round of testing today and you're not doing it because you didn't do everything else properly. So now everything's pushed back. It's very frustrating in England, and it's only going to get worse because there's a whole lot of other issues that are starting to bubble to the surface.
Jose Mourinho has actually denied reports he's attempted to delay Project Restart over concerns for players' fitness.
I thought he was pushing it.
It was claimed that Tottenham head coach Mourinho voiced his concerns over the proposal to resume football next month during a meeting with other Premier League managers yesterday. However, he has hit back at the reports and insists he is desperate for football to return as soon as it is safe, end quote.
Yeah, that was my understanding.
Yeah, and so here's his quote in a statement released by Spurs, and I wish I could do a Jose Mourinho impression. I don't think my position in the meeting has been reflected fairly at all today in media reports. I have not asked for any delay.
I have not asked for any delay?
I have not asked for any delay. I want to train, and I'm desperate for the Premier League to return as soon as it is safe to do so, particularly now we are seeing we're seeing other leagues preparing to return to action. I'm extremely proud of the way my players have maintained their fitness. They've shown great professionalism, passion, and dedication. Of course, he doesn't mention the training sessions in the park. We've all been working extremely hard through remote squad training sessions and isolated running. Now the pitches are available to use again at the training center. Every player has been extremely committed in terms of their individual work, and now we wait for clearance to commence working in small groups again, which I will fully support, end quote.
A couple things about the UK that I think we do have to keep in mind with this. It could, by the time we get to where we look back at the coronavirus and the effect country to country, it could actually end up being the worst in Europe and the UK. I think everybody's assumed that would end up being Italy, but the UK could end up being worse. They made some bad decisions in how they were going to handle things early on, and it's cost them. Still, you are way behind on everything with getting back to action. And there are reasons why you have to get back to action. A lot of financial ones that are just not going to go away. A couple other elements on the England discussion. According to the Times, Watford FC captain Troy Deeney was told at the Premier League meeting that returning to training would be safer than going to the supermarket, which I actually kind of agree with. Deeney replied that he has a choice when going to the supermarket. True, and he has different ways to get groceries. That is true. He is also not paid to go to the supermarket. And that, it's not being insensitive to say that. I hope that that's understood here. It has to be safe for these guys to come back, and you have to ensure it. There's no question about that. If you can't do that, you can't come back. But that's not a valid comparison on Deeney's part, because he is being paid by his employer to play football. And if it is safe for him to do so, he should play. If not, then you have to figure out what you're going to do with contracts, because if you're being paid to play and you're not playing, not an injury, like it's how do you handle it? Because you're also dealing with the loss of revenue. It's really complicated. But that mentality is one of the things that is slowing this down. And one reason is it is scarier in the UK. I think that is an understood thing here at the moment. But when you've got Italy after what they've faced, there's players with concerns, but it seems like there's more motivation to get back on the field. Germany has talked about it as a way to, display to the world the strength of the Bundesliga and the strength of Germany as a country. And when you have this kind of stuff going back and forth in England, it's just like, man, Darren Eales talked about it on 92.9 this week. It was followed up on by Oliver Kay in The Athletic. You've got a lot of clubs in England, and players I think can be part of it, but clubs specifically, that are only looking out for their own self-interest. Period. You want to know why? This blew my mind in Oliver Kay's piece at The Athletic. I'm just going to read the paragraph. Brighton, who's been very vocal in all of this. Brighton are a well-run club in many ways, but according to Transfermarkt, their net transfer spend over the past 5 seasons is more than £200 million, the 9th highest in world football.
Wow.
Brighton.
Wow.
Aston Villa are 12th in that particular table, despite having spent 3 of those years in the championship.
Yeah.
West Ham, 13th.
Mm-hmm.
Bournemouth, 15th in the world in spend.
Oh, wow.
Guess who they're just above? Real Madrid. Bournemouth, over the past 5 years, has spent more money in the transfer market than Real Madrid. Let that soak in for a minute.
Wow.
How many seats does Real Madrid's stadium have?
About
80,000?
About 8
70,
times
000?
more than the Vitality, yeah.
Yeah, the Vitality seats what?
10.5.
10,500 people can fit in your barn, and you're spending more money than Real Madrid. Unfrickin' believable. You want to know why they're trying to get back on the field? Also, you want to know why these clubs are trying to do everything possible to make sure they don't get relegated? That's why. Because they have spent themselves into oblivion. And Bournemouth doesn't have the money to back that kind of spending up at all. Neither does Villa, neither does Brighton. In any year, the threat of relegation after that kind of outlay would be worrying. Right now, in an industry that is already experiencing serious upheaval due to the coronavirus pandemic, it threatens to be much worse. It threatens to put Brighton, Villa, West Ham, Bournemouth out of business. Mm-hmm. You're spending more money than Real Madrid. You can have about 70,000 people less at every home match. First off, why did you blow that much money and not have a better team? That's the mind-blowing element. But how? Why? What? You're going to go out of business. And maybe you wouldn't have if this hadn't happened. Maybe you would have eventually. You probably would have. Well, this just blew all that up. And now that's why these clubs are finding every little thread possible to fight every single possible thing. Because really, their only hope to guarantee anything is to get relegation taken off the table. And they should have made that argument at the beginning. Instead of, well, we don't want to play at neutral venues. We need our home field advantage. You're not going to get that. That's not happening, so stop that. Your argument should have been from day one, the season has changed. We're not going to finish it the way that we started it. It's not fair for us to get relegated. It would do catastrophic financial harm to us if we got relegated in a competition that didn't finish the way it started. That's not fair. You should keep us up because of that, and then do multiple relegations next year. But they didn't make that argument initially. Now you're trying to get back to that because that's the only reasonable argument. And you're going to go out of business. Like, let's just be real. You spent more money over the last 5 years on transfers than Real Madrid. All of those clubs. All of those clubs did. And what did they get to show for it? A team that can't finish higher than 10th in the Premier League.
Yep.
That's an indictment on who's been making the decisions on spending the money and who's been recruiting the players, but it's also an indictment on the way that they've been financially operating. And this is where, when the players say, like, well, we don't want to take a pay cut because we feel like we're just trying to correct these issues. Well, yeah, you are, but you also wouldn't have been paid by these clubs in the first place if they hadn't been stupid. So, it kind of does go back and forth. Like, you did benefit from it. There are players who got a lot of money that should not have gotten a lot of money from these clubs because they ultimately didn't produce. So, this is where you're at, but that blew my mind.
Yeah, what was the percentage that we came across? High 80% of the TV revenue that Bournemouth brings in goes straight to player salaries. Because
it's not coming from anywhere else.
No, it's not.
And
you mentioned
they're spending more than Real Madrid.
Mm-hmm. And
that's insane.
And when you're healthy 100% and you find that one guy in the diamond in the rough that you bring up from the lower divisions, you're mid-table. That is it.
Mm-hmm.
You're fighting.
See, this is what blows my mind. If you are a well-run club, if you're one of these clubs and you are run well, you know who you are, first off. You know that it is lightning in a bottle to be Leicester City. Period. It is absolutely everything falling into place for you. You identifying the diamond in the rough, spending properly, getting the right players in, getting the right manager in, everything falling into place for you in the season. It ain't happening on a regular basis. So you can't spend like you can fix it with your money. You can't. Because it's not happening. Because you can spend all that, and Manchester City and Liverpool can still spend a whole lot more. So, what are you getting out of it? Nothing. You're not making a bunch of money here. You're not ensuring the sustainability of your club. You're not even creating the platform to be a Leicester City. You're just spending because you got it. And there's no thought behind it. I mean, I'd love to go back and look at some of these signings and say, what?
Mm-hmm.
You're not, if you're Bournemouth, you're going to have limitations because of your stadium, because of who you are. If you're going to spend that much money, how in the world are you not ensuring that you're a mid-table team at the worst? At the worst, you're a 10th place team in the Premier League if you're going to spend that much money. And on a good day, you're going to make a cup run, you're going to make a run and get into Europe, and you're going to bring in more money, and then you're going to elevate everything. I know it's logic, it's crazy, but how do you do this? Because now, because of a global pandemic, you didn't expect it, nobody did. All of your spending that was idiotic now comes to the fore because that money would be very nice to have in the bank right now. and you don't have it because you blew it on some random defender and some random goal scorer who didn't score goals for you, and you're going to get relegated anyway. That's what you did. And you did it. You made those choices. Now, you didn't plan on this happening. Nobody did. But bad things happening are what you plan for. At a club like this, who is punching above their weight, you'd like to keep doing it. You don't do it this way because you got nothing out of all that money. Nothing.
Here's your lowlights from the last handful of years, courtesy of our friends at Transfermarkt. And I do have a Brighton story to add to all of this. Glenn Murray actually spoke out as he attended the captain's meeting too.
He did?
Yeah. Arnaud Danjuma from Bruges, 18 million euro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's big time.
Lloyd Kelly from Bristol City, 14.8 euro.
You gave 14.8 million euro to Bristol City?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Here's a decent pickup that they had. Philip Billing from Huddersfield for 16.5. Okay, that's one. You really did well with Harry Wilson paying 2.7 million euro for a loan from Liverpool. Harry Wilson has provided dividends.
Okay, it's a loan. Yeah, you paid for a loan. That's smart.
Right.
That's what these clubs should be doing.
Okay, 18-19. Jefferson Lerma from Levante, 28 million euro.
Yeah.
Dominic Solanke from Liverpool, 21.2 million euro.
Yeah, okay.
Diego Rico from Leganés, 15 million euro.
Yeah, okay.
Chris Mepham from Brentford, 13.6.
Mm.
David Brooks, 11.3. That one actually has turned out decently. So
that's what you did going into 2018-19.
Yeah, and that was a
where
total
did you finish?
That was the season that everybody was healthy, and that was the mid-table year.
Okay. So everything went right. You spent all that money. You were mid-table. Then what?
Yep. 89.1 million euros spent in 18-19.
Okay.
Your departures, 20 million euro.
So you're signing guys, you're not selling guys, you're not developing guys, and you're getting to mid-table 1 year. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's where you need to be living if you have that kind of money and you're being run properly.
Yep. 17-18, you operated at a negative 34.3 million euro with arrivals. You had no one leave that you got paid for in 17-18.
Right.
You got two dudes from Chelsea, so you operate at minus 34.3. Operated a minus 17 million euro in 16-17. So this is horrendous bookkeeping.
Now, this is what you're spending in the market. This is not including salaries. So when you talk about Real Madrid, when you talk about Liverpool specifically, those are two clubs that can pay exorbitant salaries once they get a player and they can keep a player. Mm-hmm. They don't blow crazy money outside of Liverpool, and it's not crazy money because on a player like Van Dijk, you got the best center back in the world right now. So, okay, you spent for quality. That's fine. But you're not overspending for players, and if you want to keep somebody, yeah, you can pay them really well to stay. Where clubs get in trouble on the salary front is Barcelona, where they have spent big money on contracts for players in their 30s to keep them around, and that ends at some point because Father Time, undefeated, it will catch up to you. And you can't keep paying Lionel Messi, crazy salaries. You can't keep paying Busquets and Piqué and Xavi and Iniesta as long as you kept them. You can't keep bumping those numbers up and up and up and up and up and up without eventually it coming back to bite you. And Spain, and this is interesting because I did not know this about Spain. Spain, since 2013, has had a kind of a cap, sort of, in terms of managing finances. So, two different articles that Spain, in terms of their plans, this came up. This is from Moises Lorenz and Sam Marsden from ESPN. So, this cap is based on several factors, their limit, including expected income and the average amount of transfer income over the previous 3 years. So it's kind of a financial fair play idea of what are you, except there's expectations in terms of income and then average transfer income over the previous 3 years. So it could definitely be manipulated to a degree, but the league it seems like, signs off on it and says, okay, based off this, Barcelona's limit for this season was set at 671 million euro. That's spending on salaries for players, coaches, affiliated clubs, academies, transfer fees paid, agent fees. Real Madrid was capped at 641 million, for example. That cap was based off Barca's expected income for this campaign. They were expected to bring in over 1 billion euro. Well, when you don't have fans in the stands for the number of games that's going to affect, you're not going to make €1 billion. So sources have told ESPN that Barcelona will knock at least 200 million euro off their budget next season as a direct result of the pandemic. That's going to force them to ask the players who took a 70% wage cut during the state of emergency that Spain had. It's going to force Barcelona to go to them and say, we can't pay you what we're paying you. We cannot do it. Are you going to renegotiate? That's where you're at. So I didn't know that about Spain. I didn't know that La Liga had this. Now, you get to the big picture. There's a great article, and we'll retweet it from the Soccer Down Here account over at Sports Pro. Tom Bassam. He did a first part of the initial planning of how teams were dealing with the pandemic in Spain. This is part 2, and it gets into more of the financials. Let's go back to early April. Tebas, the head of La Liga, said that a behind-closed-doors finish to the season would see La Liga clubs lose $325 million compared to pre-coronavirus projections. If they don't finish the season, $1.08 billion loss across the league. Let's get into how Spain's going to try to get back, because that's a big difference. You're talking about almost $700 million difference in finishing the season and not. First round of tests, 2,500 tests across players and staff in the first 2 divisions in Spain. 8 positives. Okay, that's really good. All of those asymptomatic. All of them were in the latter stages of the virus. They're isolated, tested again in the coming days. You have 2 consecutive negative results, you can rejoin training. That's one thing we've been asking. Like, what is the process to return? 2 negatives in Spain, you're back. Okay. La Liga will offer tests to people living with the affected players. So if you test positive as a player, then they will offer tests to people in the household. That's a little different than Germany, where it's voluntary across the board. Players are subject to daily serology antibody tests. And one of the reasons is they want to identify how many players have any kind of immunity to the coronavirus. That will help them as they figure this out. The phases are pretty similar in terms of the designated clean areas on site, number of staff limited, time staggered for players, the food preparation is very secure. All those different things are pretty consistent across the board. Phase 3, after you get back to the group training, is players will live on site, because a lot of the training grounds in Spain have dormitories. And they will live there. They will not go home. They will stay in their individual rooms. They'll do 8-player groups of training, 3 different groups, no more than 20 staff on site. Groups will be split across 3 dressing rooms, and no more than 3 players are together in the room at a time. After their sessions, they return to their room. After that phase, teams will be allowed to train together, still separated across multiple dressing rooms, disinfected after every use. The whole process of that is about a month. It's not a hard deadline, but that's roughly what they're looking at. Now, here's a little bit more on the financials in Spain that you got to consider. We haven't had these kind of numbers before. Telefonica, who is the major domestic broadcaster of La Liga in Spain, 980 million euro a year. Reportedly has around 10%, about 100 million euro left to pay of its contract for this season. However, the pay TV operator has paid fees for games which have not yet been delivered. So if they don't play, throw another 160 million euro in as a refund. So 260 million euro at risk on the TV side domestically. This is where it gets bigger. MediaPro is the international broadcast rights holder. Their contract, they're in the middle of it, and it's over 5 years that they pay approximately $5 billion for the international rights. So just under $1 billion a year. Now, it's not quite clear how that's weighted annually. I think it's a safe assumption it's about the same every year. The Spanish media company's chief exec, Jaime Roures, has already said that they're not paying for games that don't happen. So that's another, if you're talking about, let's say it's the same as Telefonica, where 260 million of 980 million, so a little more than a quarter, is still in play. You're talking another 250 million in play on the international side. That's another 500 million. So when you go back to the beginning, and that's in US dollars, that's not in euros. If you want to go in euros, I don't have the conversion. 4.48 billion euro over 5 years. It's roughly the same. We'll try to roughly compare it. You go back to the beginning of what they're talking about losing. Just under, let's say, 674 million is what you're looking at if you don't finish. If you don't finish the season at all. That's $1 billion. That's dollars. Okay, that's US dollars. So we're like for like. So 674, you take about 500 out. You see how much TV factors in Spain.
83%.
Yeah. That's why they're trying to figure this out. You take that, and then you take it to this cap, and your cap is set including your expected income for the next year, your average amount of transfer income over the previous 3 years, which will still be high, but that's going to decrease over the next 3 years. Your expected income is going to be dramatically different next year. If one team, that's going to knock about 200 million euro off their budget. That's not just losses this year that this is going to hit, that you're talking 674 if you don't finish. If you finish, you're still going to lose, around $300-something million. But it's not even, let's say you finish in Spain. It's not even just this year. It's not like everything goes back to normal. We've talked about it with the market being different. Your cap of what you can spend in Spain is going to be dramatically different. So Barcelona's in a world of hurt right now. I think Atletico Madrid is also in that world of hurt. Real Madrid, not as much hurt. It's going to create even more separation in Spain, and it might make Real Madrid look a lot like a PSG in France, like a Bayern Munich in Germany, where they are by far the dominant powerhouse, and there's nobody in their same league in terms of finances.
All right, before we go into other leagues real quick, I found my Brighton information in addition to my Glenn Murray quotes. This is Brighton's net spend since they came out of the championship and went into the Premier League a couple of years ago.
Okay.
Coming into the Premier League, net spend minus 67 million euro.
The year coming in?
Yes.
Okay, that's understandable.
17-18.
Yep.
So then the next year, or once again, ever since they got in, they've been at the bottom of the table fighting to stay afloat each and every time. 18-19, net spend minus 74.9 million euro.
So you spent a lot year one, which you had to upgrade your squad. I understand. Right. Yep. You spent even more the next year, so your upgrade didn't work.
Correct.
So you're trying to fix your upgrade and still upgrade your squad. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Spent 88.3 outlay. You sold out 13.4.
Okay.
Then this season, you spent 77 million euro, and you ended up transferring out 2.5.
So you've spent about, roughly, I mean, we're getting into 10, 15 million different year to year, but you've spent about the same every year, and you've got nothing to show for it.
Other than staying afloat, and that's it.
Yeah.
You're at the bottom. You're at the bottom, fighting relegation each and every time.
Now, there's two things to this. We talked about in Spain, what's happening is probably going to solidify Real Madrid as the powerhouse in Spain, ahead of Barca, ahead of Atleti, ahead of everybody else. England, you have that too. I mean, we're talking about Brighton being crazy and spending the money that they're spending and not getting anything out of it. But to get to the next level, you got to spend 3 times what you're spending to get there. And then that's not even staying there. That's, again, if you spend it, you get it right, you have the right coach to get everything out of it, you don't have any major injuries in a season, you get into Europe so you bring in more money, okay. But that's a lot of things you got to get right. I've always been of the opinion that a team like a Brighton should focus on sustainability, on being solid, and finding your baseline. A club like that, this is why I had a lot of respect for Roberto Martinez at Wigan. And I know people hammered him like, oh, well, he didn't really ever win anything. Well, Wigan wasn't a club you could win anything. Like, Wigan had come up from, like, the 3rd division, right? I mean, they were nothing.
League One championship and then
Yeah, they were nothing. And they got up to the Premier League. And what did they do? They stayed for a long time. And, at times it was by the skin of their teeth, but they stayed up. They probably spent a lot of money to do that, but they were able to do something that club is not Brighton. That club is not Villa. It's not West Ham. They weren't supposed to be at the party, and they got to hang around for a long time. That's impressive. Brighton, Villa, and West Ham should not be in this situation.
No.
They're too big for this. That's incompetence. Bournemouth has to understand that they're more of a Wigan. Because of their infrastructure, they're just not built to be that big. Norwich, I think, is a step ahead of Bournemouth. They should be higher up.
Yeah.
But we didn't mention them in that spending table either. So,
no,
okay.
Because they understand their place and they knew what it took to get to the Premier League. And I keep going back to the quote from head coach Daniel Farke, why they didn't do anything in the Christmas transfer window. He says his quote was, "We're paying for our past sins. We got to do it with what we got."
Yeah. You've got to a point when you try to fix it. Gwen's a big Norwich fan, so she's excited. We're talking about the Canaries.
Gwen and Michelle, not a lab. That makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense. Gwen is a lab, though, so we get a little confusing with that. But you can't spend your way into being something you're not. And that's what a lot of clubs in England have not learned, and they're about to. And they might learn it the hard way by spending themselves into being not a club. That's the problem. Norwich will be okay. Bournemouth might not. Okay. And that's where we're at.
Here's your Glenn Murray quotes. Glenn Murray, as captain for Brighton, was in that meeting with Troy Deeney, Mark Noble, and all the others. Glenn Murray believes Premier League football is being rushed back too soon amid the coronavirus pandemic. He was on the call about how and when training will step up ahead of the prospective mid-June return. He tells Sky, meaning Murray, football isn't necessarily a necessity. It's a game. It's a sport. I mean, what if we go through all this rigmarole of trying to get back started and we have a second peak and we're stopped anyways? I just can't understand, after just sort of loosening the lockdown, why we're in such a rush to get it back. Why can't we just wait sort of a month or so to see if things go to plan?
You can't wait a month because of the timeline we talked about.
Yep.
So that is part of it, and that, again, is part of the communication process that has obviously not happened. You do have that risk, but that's why you have to have the protocols that are in place to handle when these things happen. It would not be a shocking thing if you had a positive test, because players are not going to be isolated. They are going to go home. And as we've seen, some players can't stay at home right now, let alone once they start playing games. That's on them. And they're going to hurt their team, and they're going to potentially infect their team. That's on them, and that has to be understood. This is my frustration with the conversation in England. It's getting to a point that it's, well, we can't keep our players from going out and doing things. Well, we can't keep our fans from congregating outside of venues. Well, we can't do anything. Well, then you're not going to play, and you're going to lose all of this money. Sorry. Like, that's what's about to happen. If clubs can't take on the responsibility because their players can't or don't want to or haven't been motivated to, their fans can't or don't want to or haven't been motivated to, they're not going to play because the government's not going to allow them to play. And if they don't play, they're going to lose a whole lot of money. And it's not just the Premier League clubs that are going to be affected. It's going to be everybody. And these Premier League clubs and players who are in this conversation don't want the responsibility that they have to take to do this. And also don't understand it because it's not just about their club and them individually. It is about the group. I do get the fear. I want to, again, I feel like you have to say this every single time, and that's fine. I'm not saying rush back and don't have proper protocol and don't have safety. I would never say that. All that is a given in this conversation. You don't have the amount of testing to know who has it and who doesn't. You don't have the right protocols to limit the spread. You don't have the right things done to play behind closed doors. You don't have all of those things in place. You can't come back. No question. If you have vetted protocols that have been approved by your government, by your health agencies, by your clubs, by your players, you can come back. And yes, I do think you can end up in a safer, more, I think, controlled place than you or I. Because, these players are going to get access to testing. You're going to know that the players you are sharing the practice field with, the players you are sharing the competitive field with, are good because everybody is being tested and everybody is living up to the responsibility. You're not worried about it at that case. If we can't get to that point that we understand that in this situation, this is not going to the supermarket. And that's where I kind of push back on what Troy Deeney said. You go to the supermarket, you don't know who's there. You don't know if they've been tested. You don't know if you're going to walk in and they got a mask on, if they're actually following protocols, or if they were at a house party the night before or the hours before doing who knows what. You don't know that when you walk in. When you walk into the locker room or you walk into the stadium to play a match, if all these protocols are set in place, you know that the people you're sharing space with have been tested and are good. That's a big difference. I think we miss that when we talk about this a lot. If all of that is in place, you know and can feel secure about who you are sharing space with. I can't when I go to the store. When I'm at Publix yesterday, the Publix I went to, people followed the one-way aisles a little bit better. And it was the first time since I've went out during all of this that I felt like more people in the store were wearing a mask than not. And that was good. That made me feel a little bit better. Still, staying away from people, still keeping a distance. If it's 6 feet, I'm staying 12. If I see somebody on the aisle, I'm trying to go down a different aisle. I'm doing everything possible to avoid that because I don't know who I'm around. I don't know anything about it. And they don't know that about me either. In an environment like this where you have the testing to back it up, you have the protocols to back it up, you have people signing on that they're going to do the things that are needed, you can feel more secure. It's not the same thing. And it should be very safe, safer than the average. And yes, they're giving up more than the average. I understand that. They're also being paid more than the average. So then you go back to that side of it. You have to get the buy-in. You have to have the protocol. You have to make it understood. That's the reality of the situation if you come back. Whether it's MLS, whether it's the Premier League, La Liga, Serie A, the Bundesliga. I'll be very curious to see what the conversation is after this weekend. Because in Germany, you have big games this weekend. You have some big rivalry matches. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. But you have a situation where you've had lots of testing. You've had lots of protocols followed. And I think everybody involved feels comfortable with who they are sharing space with. And that's the number one thing about this. If you don't know who you're sharing space with, you're running a big risk. If you know who you're sharing space with and they're getting tested and they're following the protocols to avoid the spread and avoid catching it, you should feel pretty good about what you're doing. I'd like to feel that way. I don't feel that way about going to the store. And that's all I'm doing. So I'd like to know that I could go into a space and feel good about people being tested and where people are with all of this. So the league's got to explain that. In England, there is a huge disconnect in explaining it.
Yeah, Tafka, really quickly about our discussion about the Premier League spending. He says, that's why I have zero sympathy for some of these EPL clubs demanding protection from relegation or other dispensation. When you spend like that, in all caps, on a gamble, in caps, of staying in a given league, you don't deserve to operate a sports club. Sorry, I'm not sorry. Even without a pandemic, spending that rashly will likely have been their demise in a few years. COVID just advanced the timeline.
It did. The reason why I don't think there should be relegation, and this should have been their argument from the beginning, is from the competitive structure. It is not what they signed up for this season. You don't know, and it's the same thing you always argue if a referee blows a call and you have a protest situation. It's hard to rule on the outcome without playing it from that point because you don't know what would have happened. We don't know if Brighton would have went on a run and stayed up, no questions asked. We don't know if Bournemouth would have had the great escape. We don't know if Norwich would have had that. There's no way to know because that's not going to happen. You're not going to have the season that was halted. If you finish, it's going to be behind closed doors. That is going to affect it. It could be at neutral sites. That would affect it. It's going to be different. And the argument should have been from day one is we're finishing different than we started. We don't know what would have happened. You shouldn't relegate anybody because of that. And I would have signed on for that. I think that's the most fair way. Even with the bad spending, even with the horrible structure, even with all the things. Tafka, I totally agree with Tafka. But that would have been my argument, and I think you could have made a compelling case. But it sounds like you've blown that opportunity, and now you've created so much friction that nobody wants to hear what you're saying. And that's a problem because they have to make decisions. They have to move forward because you've got the leagues below them. It looks like League One and League Two are not going to play. David Kahn at The Guardian said clubs in the championship are aiming for May 25th as a possible date to return to training. You've got, if the season is canceled, how you're going to finish the season. So League One and League Two have to figure out points per game. Is it weighted for home and away? There's still talk about having playoff matches for promotion spots. The EFL chairman, Rick Perry, told the Commons Select Committee for Digital, Culture, Media, and Sport last week, government committee, that the EFL as a whole is facing a potential £200 million deficit caused by the suspension. Most in the championship, I would assume.
Yeah.
EFL board says they can't come back to training until May 25th. Cardiff City, Sheffield Wednesday, Huddersfield Town, and Hull City, according to John Percy at The Telegraph, are all strongly opposed to resuming the season. John Cross of The Mirror brought up a very interesting thing. The other significant issue discussed in the championship meeting was a wage cap, also known as a salary cap. Mirror Sport understands they must agree a figure of between 15 million and 20 million pounds for the total wage bill in the championship. Any club over that figure, which every team that gets relegated would be over that, is only able to sign new players on 10 million pounds a week, or no, sorry, 10,000 pounds a week, which is the average wage in the championship. So you can only sign guys at an average contract until your finances fall into line. So that's the punishment. If you're over, you can't add new players until you get in line. Okay, so it's not a hard cap. Promotion relegation definitely stay in place according to this. EFL are also keen to keep their playoffs for League One and League Two. Playoffs could be played behind closed doors at Wembley. That's where the lower division stands. So the Premier League has to make a decision. It will affect the lower divisions. The lower divisions have a lot of decisions to make. Everything affects one another. And the FA doesn't run all of them, but the FA is like in the background in all of this when they should be at the forefront. And that's a problem.
Who were the teams in the championship that had issues?
Cardiff City.
They're 9th. They're safe.
Wednesday.
15th, 9 points from safety.
Huddersfield.
18th, 3 points from safety.
Hull.
Right on the edge. They are the team above the relegation zone.
They are all strongly opposed to resuming the season, according to John Percy at the Telegraph.
Okay. So I just wanted to see where those teams were in the table and part of their rationale, perhaps.
Couple other things before we finish up with any tweets and comments that are out there. So I'm going to go somewhat rapid fire here. Sam Stejkal on Twitter yesterday, slight adjustment to the timeline that he had for the MLS Orlando plan. More likely that games would begin around July 1st rather than June 22nd. Adds an extra week of training. I think that's very important. That was something we talked about yesterday. On the men's national team front, Sebastian Soto has agreed to sign a contract at Norwich until 2023. I like Soto a lot. He was one of the most impressive players for me at the U20 World Cup. Denied a work permit, which I get. He hasn't played for the senior national team. According to the agent, the plan is to loan him out to Holland, Belgium, or Germany for a year, get national team appearances, make him eligible for a work permit by 21. MLS, get on the horn to Norwich. Get him on loan. Really good young player. And yeah, he should be getting national team appearances. People have talked a lot about Josh Sargent, and Josh Sargent's a very good young player. Sebastian Soto is going to push him. I like Soto a lot. On the college front, and this is across all sports, but specifically in the Big South Conference, they are cutting their men's and women's soccer tournaments to the top 4 teams, and they're going to be played on campus. 5 other sports are doing a similar format. They don't know what enrollment's going to look like until they get to the fall. They probably don't know what classes are going to look like till they get to the fall. You've got institutions projecting potentially a 20% drop in enrollment, and that's going to affect tuition, room and board revenue, some of the money that athletic departments have to work with. They've got to all be more efficient. So that's the Big South, which is not a huge conference, but you're going to see these ramifications across college soccer as well. We mentioned the UEFA announcements in France. This is an interesting one that I want to see if anything more comes of it. So remember, the league was stopped by the government. Then the league had to decide what they were going to do about placement, and Lyon is missing out on European competition. They decided on using points per game rather than going back to the last fully completed round. That was one idea on the table. Well, Le Parisien, outlet in France, has revealed that the Ligue 1 presidents voted to do it that way to make sure that Lyon wouldn't get any European competition as revenge against Jean-Michel Aulas.
Wow.
That's a bold statement.
Mm-hmm.
Be curious to see if more comes out of that one.
Mm-hmm.
Germany, Derek Ray tweeted out that Dortmund's mayor is appealing to the common sense of fans ahead of the big match this weekend, instructing them not to meet in front of the stadium or in bars. Quote, "We should have a clean sheet in terms of the chain of infection." So you're getting these kinds of conversations. England, you're getting police chiefs who are saying that we don't think they should play because we can't control it. In the Netherlands, remember, they stopped their league because the government said no professional football before September 1st, even behind closed doors. Their Minister of Medical Care and Sport has left that door open a little bit. He said if it were possible under certain conditions to do it earlier, then I would like to take a look at it. He's asking for a plan from the Dutch Federation. Don't have one yet, but he's saying that maybe we could accelerate the process. The damage to Dutch pro clubs could hit 400 million euro. That's a lot because you don't have the same revenues, and you're hitting it that way. Yeah. BBC in Scotland talking about the insolvency issues. Insolvency specialist Ken Potullo has said that wage commitments and a reliance on gate receipts could prove fatal to clubs. Scottish Premiership clubs earn a greater percentage of their income, 43% in 2018, greater percentage of their income from ticket sales than any other top league in Europe, according to UEFA's latest report. So they're going to get hit the hardest if you're playing behind closed doors. This is from Patullo about what they could be facing. And he's the insolvency specialist. Scotland's top-tier clubs seem to be nowhere near having a roadmap toward the resumption of any form of play, and meanwhile they remain in financially corrosive limbo. They lack the financial clout of the English Premier League, and the cost to clubs of completing the outstanding games when they have little or no income could be devastating. While I don't believe we are looking at a doomsday scenario and most Scottish clubs will survive, I'm afraid that some insolvencies are probably inevitable among the hardest hit clubs. And he's talking top flight.
Yeah.
That's what's on the board. Turkey, Besiktas, have confirmed 8 cases of COVID-19 at the club's facilities. Players and staff, the club president has also tested positive, and that's from their official Twitter account. I'm guessing that they're first starting their testing to potentially get back. It's going to be a minute at Besiktas. Australia is trying to get their season done. They're looking at a hub-like model, kind of like MLS, to complete the final 6 rounds of the season. They don't have a time frame yet, but they're watching the reintroduction of the National Rugby League this month. The government wants to lift more and more restrictions. They'd like to get this done. The A-League on the soccer front's watching rugby to see how they do it and how it goes. Copa Libertadores announced that they would use the 5 substitutions that IFAB and FIFA allowed. They're going to allow for roster changes after the group stage. They also issued a statement that said that players must not blow mucus from their nose.
Yep.
Yes, that's good. Don't swap shirts after the game. Use their own personal water bottles. Face masks must be worn while giving post-match interviews and by substitutes on the bench. That's for Copa Libertadores return to action. That's your look around the world in about 5 minutes.
Yep. Copa Libertadores and Copa Sudamericana have been told players must avoid spitting and kissing the ball as a part of the new rules published by CONMEBOL.
I feel like if you're doing all of the testing and doing all the protocols, you shouldn't be worried to that degree of that kind of stuff. I'm okay with the spitting and the mucus being launched from the nose. I'm okay with these things being eliminated. That's good. The rest of it's a little much. Common sense, there's no need to do it, so don't do it. But that can get to the point where you're talking about, well, don't mark somebody too closely. No,
yeah.
There's no need to be thinking that way if all the testing and if all the protocols are being followed.
Yeah. On Twitter, Chris Hutchison posts a photo of himself, and he says he was born to social distance. And he's got the full headband, sunglasses, and a scarf all the way from the nose down past the sternum. So everything will be sternum. Okay.
That's
all the way down. It's a big scarf, dude. It is all the way down.
Okay. I was like, man,
nose,
full bodysuit.
Close. And he is all dressed in green in the photo, and he's in front of a sign that says everything will be okay, and he gives the okay sign. So,
and it will.
We are officially caught up on the Twitters, and I think that is a show.
That is a show. A lot of stuff. We had a lot of material to work with and a lot of data points. If you guys have any questions as you hear this, please throw them our way. We'll get into them tomorrow. A lot to talk about tomorrow. Bundesliga will be back in action this weekend. We'll kind of give you a basic primer of what to expect. At least from what we know, I mean, it's hard to guess about what these teams are going to look like. It's hard to guess, what the quality is going to look like and just what the feeling is. That's what I keep waiting to see is, what do these games feel like? I don't know. I'm intrigued by the whole process. So I want to see it this weekend. We'll get you set. We'll give you the storylines to be looking for. We'll keep you posted on all the other things that'll pop up because England's got a lot to sort out. Spain's got a lot of work to do. Italy's got a lot of work to do. All these other countries have a lot of work to do, and we'll have a lot to talk about tomorrow. So if a lot of stuff happens today, maybe if my sinuses cooperate and we're actually somewhat rested, maybe we hop on Twitch later and do an evening show if there's enough to cover. If not, we'll do it in the morning. We'll give you a heads up with some notice if we do that, and we'll then cover everything again in the morning show in more detail. So lots of stuff. We're just trying to keep you updated as best we can. Thanks for being part of it. Thanks for asking all the questions you do, and don't ever feel like you can't ask more. We love the questions, and if we have enough and we need to add another show or just a Q&A show a couple times a week, then that's what we'll do. So we got the time. We got the places to do it. Thanks to Spreaker. Thanks to our friends at Barn Burner. We've got places to give you this content, and if you want it, we will give it to you. So thank you so much for being part of it. We'll be back tomorrow, maybe later, if England goes crazy, or Scotland goes crazy, which is probably more likely.
Today?
Yeah, we didn't get that one today. Maybe we'll get it tomorrow. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata, y'all.